you got drenched in the rainstorm. So for those of you who did that, I really appreciate that you came out tonight. So I have a short amount of time to talk to you, so I want to get right into it. But we're going to talk about what it means to win, what it means to play to win, and how we can all get more wins in our lives. And so this is something I've been strangely obsessed with for a very long time. And to understand why, I have to tell you a little bit about my childhood and go back so you can see why I think so much about winning and losing. And I do have a confession to make to start off with, is that when I was younger, I was an awful winner, a really bad winner. And I was a really, really bad loser. And so it's kind of weird that you can be actually bad at both of those two things, but I really was. So I'll explain to you how that happened. So I grew up in a, I think you would call it a non-traditional family. It certainly was. It looked like that from the outside, how it was built and how we looked, but on the inside of the family, it was very, very traditional. But my mother is a strong Irish woman, super smart, thinks out the box, and she doesn't really care what other people think about her. So she's just a very kind of strong-willed woman. So she was married at the age of 18, and had 3 kids, and those are my 3 older brothers and sisters, Lenore, Dee Dee, and George. And then she was divorced and she met my father, and she had me and my brother Daniel. And then that didn't work, and she met my father, who raised me since the age I was 2 years old, and he brought his son Jackson into the family. So it is a mix of kids, 6 kids in this family. We're all close in age. 4 are white, 2 are black, 2 white parents. And when we would go out to family events, everyone was always just baffled by like, what's happening here? And so my mom was always very strong and strict about, okay, we're a family, and we don't use the term half-brother or step-sister. So you just tell people, this is your brother and this is your sister, and we're not going to qualify it and we're not going to explain it. And I was like, but Mom, like, when I introduced my sister Dee Dee, she's like 5'2" and white. And then when I say this to my sister, everyone's like, And we've had so many different, people respond. Like one guy was like, oh, a sorority sister, huh? And then I was like, no, actually my sister. And then, are you sure? Oh, are you saying she's a sister? And I'm like, what? It's like, no. So now, and that's all fine and good now, but when I was 12 years old, it was not something that I liked. I was standing out when I wanted to fit in, and our family just wasn't fitting in. Add on to that I was already 6'1" at the age of 12. I grew strangely quick. So I was in that. Did anyone else have those years of like the awkward middle school years, like the glasses and the braces? And oh, thank you. Okay, there's one woman in the back. So I can totally feel your pain, because I was like just that girl who was so standing out for her age. And so I like to refer to those years as my unsettled years. I didn't really quite know how I fit into the world. So the good news was that I was athletic, though. And so I was very competitive, and I liked playing sports with my brothers. And I had 3 of them. So we played sports all the time. And the bad news about that was I was the bad winner and the bad loser. So when I would win, I would just be in their face, and I'd be like, oh, you got beat by your little sister and you lose. And they would just, it was so super annoying that they would always be so mad at me when we were done. And then when I would lose, like literally, it was just like tears just rolling down my face. And then I'd be like, please, let's play again. One more time. And then, or if I was anticipating that I was going to lose, like we were playing Monopoly, and I could see that I was running out of money, then I would just like, oops, the board just tipped over. Like that's who I was. Like, that's not a good look. So those years were hard for me. So my mother, who I told you about earlier, as I said, very no nonsense, was finally tired of it. She came into my room one night and said, I'm done with you playing with your brothers. She was like, I'm not sure why you're so impacted by the impact of a game. Either you win or you lose. You're a mess for both. So she's like, you're not doing it anymore. And so I was like, no, Mom, no, I have to play. And she was like, nope. And she said, and Leah, you need to think about, why are you so impacted by the outcome? It's like you're thinking something's wrong with you if you win or lose. And she goes, I think you have some work to do on yourself. So she left my room, and I thought, I have no idea what she is talking about. Like, what does that even mean when you're 13? I have work to do on myself. So I just ignored that thing. And so I went on to play. I did leave my brothers alone and decided to play with people who wanted to play with me, so I went into high school sports. And when I got there, it was a very big piece for me because I connected in with my teammates. I was starting to feel confident in myself of what this tall body could do. I connected in on what it meant to be a good teammate and how to make other people better. And luckily, I had this really great coach who really taught us how to not only be great athletes, he saw us as more than athletes. He saw us as people. So he, at the end of every practice on Fridays, he would teach us like leadership skills, and he would make us talk about like how do we impact other people and how do we want to impact the other kids in school. And I had never thought about that we had an impact on other kids in school. And so it was the first time I started kind of doing that work. So that first key that I want to say to everybody in this room is, and I call it welcoming the work, is that as soon as I welcomed that work and really started doing that for myself, is figuring out who I was and what I had to give, and that it was okay being in this tall body. And then the team, of course, loved my big crazy family because they were at every game yelling and screaming. And so I learned to not be embarrassed of the family, but be really proud of it. And so it was in that moment that I realized, oh, that's what my mom was talking about with that whole do the work thing. And so for everyone in here, as we're looking for more wins in our everyday lives, as we're looking for more wins with our family, in our workplaces, in our communities, we want to figure out how to do that. We have to welcome the work. And I call it welcome the work because I know most of us try to avoid this kind of work where you have to like look in at yourself and figure stuff out. But it's such a relief when you do it that you might as well just welcome it. And what I love about this is that most of us can see it in other people so easily. Like, you know, you'll be at the lunchroom at work and you'll be like, wow, Jim is really struggling with some dad issues. He should really work on that, you know? Or like, wow, Krista, doesn't she bring a lot of drama to the office, you know? And you can really see it in other people, but way harder to see in yourself, right? And so I think we kind of have to step away and stop being so worried about what that work is, because that is, I think, the number one thing that we all have to do. And I had a teammate in college who was really a good player, but she had this father who was she could never please her dad. And even though she had gotten a Division I scholarship, even though she had a full ride to the University of Minnesota to play at the highest level, and she was a great three-point shooter, her dad was never pleased with her. So she was a tough teammate to have because she was always in a different space than the rest of us. And we would be celebrating a win, and she would be on the bench crying because her dad was going to take her through the game afterwards and tell her everything that she had done wrong. And so it was really difficult to watch her in that. We didn't know how to help her, but also it was hard to be her teammate. So finally, her junior year, she went home and just finally told her dad, I can't do this with you anymore. And they worked through all that stuff that summer, and it took a lot. And so she welcomed the work. And when she got back, it was really different. She was a totally different teammate. And it was like she was lighter, like we could all connect with her. And we had one year where we all just like really bonded. And so I think that's the impact for all of us as we're trying to find more wins, is like we can't really hide from this piece right here of like welcoming the work. The one thing that I have to say that I've learned from being in sports for 20 plus years is that we always think that it's all about the strategy. Like, what is it like to be around winning teams? What does it take to be a winning team? And we always think, you know, oh, I know it's about the strategy. And, you know, in football, they have like playbooks that are this big, and they have offensive schemes and defensive schemes. And when they, you know, bring a play in to the game, they cover their mouths so no one can see it, like it's so secretive. And so, I mean, and obviously we know that strategy is important to what you have to do to win games. So that's a big part of it. But what I've seen over 20 years of working with athletes, of interviewing athletes, of being around coaches and talking to them, that if athletes don't feel valued, and if they don't feel like you see them, and if they don't feel like you care about them away from the field or the court or whatever it is, they will not excel for you at the highest level. And it's really as simple as that. And it's the same for all of us in this room. When we walk into our offices, if we're not feeling valued by our bosses, or if we're the receptionist and we feel like no one sees us, do you think you're really going to work at your highest level? You know, I doubt it. And so this next piece for me is really you have to connect first and then collaborate. And I think this is where corporate America or businesses can really learn from sports, is because coaches do this work day in and day out with teams. They spend every single day making sure the players are where they need to be. What do you need today? What's happening? What can we do as a group? How do we keep our standards high? How do we work hard all the time? It's a non-stop thing that happens. And sometimes on the business side of it, we have like a yearly meeting where we're like, everyone's done a fantastic job this year and enjoy the free beer tonight, and then that's the thank you. And that's not enough. If you want people to excel for you at the very top of their game and be the best they can be, then you really have to keep them going at the highest level. You have to stay with them. You have to connect into them. My college coach, who I had for 2 years at the University of Minnesota, was someone who did not do that work of connecting. And she was a screamer and a yeller. I still wake up with nightmares of her face, like right here, like screaming at me, and she was just super intense. I understand now why. She didn't know how to coach, and she wasn't supported at the University of Minnesota. But then I couldn't have even played my best under her, even if I would have I did want to. I just couldn't have done it because when I was on the court, I was nervous, and I was thinking about her, and I was wondering when I was going to get pulled out of the game. And when you do that, you can't be focused on the game, so you can't be playing at the highest level. And the difference, though, is having the opportunity to work with the Minnesota Lynx, which has been really my favorite part of my career, and finally seeing up close what it is to work with champions. And the Minnesota Lynx have won 4 championships. So it's pretty cool to see up close. And what I saw what their coach did, the coach Cheryl Reeve, is before she brought the strategy out, is she did the connecting. So she knows everything about her players. She supports their families who don't live here. Some live across the country, some live across the world. She knows everything that they're into. She supports their social justice causes if that's what they're into. And she lets them know that that's the work that we're gonna do together, so we have to have that connection. And that connection then moves to the next level. When she asks them to execute at the highest level, they're willing to do that for themselves, for the team, for her, and then they can get there. And that's 4 championships later. For everybody in this room, if you go to work and you're trying to move a big group of volunteers, or if you're trying to get everyone to buy into a new office product or some type of launch, you can't start with the strategy. It has to start with the connection. And I think that's what we miss so quickly in business, is that we forget everyone has the same piece. And Brene Brown, Dr. Brene Brown, who I love her, she writes on vulnerability, and she has a quote that's just, it's not about the winning or the losing, it's about being seen when you cannot control the outcome. And that's basically for everything. So in the end, we're always trying to be seen as basic humans, right? So those are just a couple of the things that I've been able to learn from being around athletes and being in sports for most of my life. And I'm assuming now that you've heard my background that no one's interested in playing a board game with me later. But I would be happy to talk to any of you about any sports, or if you have any questions, I would be more than pleased to have any conversations. So thank you for coming out tonight in the rain, and I appreciate it.